obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in a state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dang war jpe dra no par jpe geg Tharpa dang zyom che kempe pe bardu cho par jpe tam che kiso jpe Manang kadang nyam pe sim chen tam che dewa dang den Dug now dang drill ner du la na me pa yang dug par zog pe jang chu brimpo che tho par je. Action Bodhicitta Prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until the time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until the time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Dashe du sang ma ke gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa lako. Mashe bardu lu nagi sam gewa lako. Du de ring ne sung te nima sangda samgi bardu lu nagi sam gewa lako. Long Refuge Prayer. We take refuge in the kind lamas, lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities, the Mandalas, the Idams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sangha. We take refuge in all the Nibbuladakas, Dakinis, Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root lamas, the lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities, the Mandalas, the Idams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sangha. We take refuge in all the Nibbuladakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Drinchen sawa dengi parchepe peldan lama dampa namla kapsuchio. Yidam kilkor gilo shog namla kapsuchio. Sange chomden de namla kapsuchio. Dampe cho namla kapsuchio. Pagpege du namla kapsuchio. Bawo kandro chokung samme shog yeshe kichen deng dempa namla kapsuchio. Taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind, progressed in the Bodhisattva path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to Bodhicitta and apply myself to the common stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind, progressed in the Bodhisattva path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to Bodhicitta and apply myself to the common stages of the path. Cheng Chub Ning Por Chiki Bar Sangha Namla Kapsuchi Chodang Cheng Chub Sempeyi Shogla Yang Deshin Kapsuchi Jitar Nangi Desheki Cheng Chub Thogni Ke Padang Cheng Chub Sempe La Pala Deda Grimshin Nepatar Deshin Drola Pendandu Cheng Chub Semne Kijijing Deshin Duni La Pala Rimpa Jindu La Pargio. Short Refuge Prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may attain Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chok namla, chengshu bardu dakni kapsuchi, dagi jin soki pesonanki, drola pinchir sangye drupar shok. The Four Immeasurables. May all Mother sentient being balance the sky of happiness and the cause of happiness. May they liberate from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all Mother sentient beings balance the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadang nyampe semchen tamche dewa dang dewe gudang dempar jerchik. Dugna dang dugna giga dang drawa jerchik. Dugna mepe dewa dang mi drawa jerchik. Niring chakda nidang drewe tong namla nama par jerchik. 100-syllable purification mantra of Vajrasattva. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Drito Mebawa Sudokayo Mebawa Supokayo Mebawa Anurakta Mebawa Sarasiti Me Prasha Sarva Karma Sutsame Susanshriya Kuruhang Ha 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 Ho Bhagawan Sarva Tathagata Bajramami Mansi Bazibawa Ma Samaya Sawa Om Bhajasattva Samaya Manupalaya Bhajasattva Tenopa Drito Mebawa Sudokayo Mebawa Supokayo Mebawa Anurakta Mebawa Sarasiti Me Prasha Sarva Karma Susame Susanshriya Kuruhang Ha 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 Ho Bhagawan Sarva Tathagata Bajramami Mansi Bhajabawa Ma Samaya Sawa Om Bhajasattva Samaya Manupalaya Bhajasattva Tenopa Drito Mebawa Sudokayo Mebawa Supokayo Mebawa Anurakta Mebawa Sarasiti Me Prasha Sarva Karma Susame Susanshriya Kuruhang Ha 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 Ho Bhagawan Sarva Tathagata Bajramami Mansi Bhajabawa Ma Samaya Sawa Om Vajrasattva Samaya, help protect my vow to purify myself. May it remain firm with me. Grant me the complete satisfaction. Grow with me. Be loving towards me. Grant me the attainment to master the powers beyond body and nature. Show me all the deeds of body, speech, and mind. Make my mind heart good, virtuous, and auspicious. Revel in the bliss of the four joys. O blessed one who embodies the essence within me. Do not abandon me. Grant me the realization of indestructible nature. Make me one with you. Thus I signify my unity with non-duality. Ah.
Okay, thank you very much. So, does anybody, Alea or Kunga, do you have any comments or questions about anything that we've talked about, or maybe something that you would like to talk about that we haven't talked about?
I just feel like I'm kind of taking everything in right now, so it's still like a lot to kind of digest, but I think when we ended last week with the questions, I think I was just kind of letting that settle in, so just kind of picking up from there.
Okay. Have you been able to spend any time during the week, making time for studying or reading or reciting, contemplating?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes in waves. It's kind of like intermittent when I like do have time. So I've been trying to follow along in the book, and I've been trying to read like a chapter a week to just stay on top of where we are. So that's been good and helpful. I think sometimes it's just hard to get like some time to do that. So I will be out of town next weekend on vacation with some friends, and we're all, I guess the goal is kind of like to just like rest and relax. So I think I'll be able to do that a little bit more next week. So that'll be good. Yeah.
Good. That's good. It's good to think about doing that, taking your book with you, or
Correct. Yeah.
that's really
I think it'll be good. Yeah. I'm trying not to take work with me. So
okay.
yeah.
Very good. Do you
Yeah.
enjoy reading the book? What do you think of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, the way it's laid out and so on?
I think it's good the way like it breaks things down, and like it gives it in like short, spurts of like information too. So I think that's helpful. Like I've been able to check things off and then like underline things, and that's been helpful. Because it is like a lot to take in, and I think as I'm reading it too, also relating it to like the Ayurveda stuff and the Hinduism things that I like learned also in my holistic medicine course also. So it's been helpful in that way, kind of like melding those two together. Yeah.
Okay, and of course you recognize that it's something that we repeat over and over again, in cycles, and so this time we might miss something, and we get it the next time.
Yeah, that's right.
And it reinforces it and so on, so we don't have to feel like, wow, I got to learn this now, all of this, and memorize it. It's more of a natural progression, that we begin to recognize these things within ourselves and so on. And
Yeah.
do you spend any time when you're reading? Do you compare it to the outline book that we have? Have you been able to do that?
I didn't know I was supposed to do that, but is that a good way
It's
to
just
do
a
it?
tool. It's another
Oh,
tool.
got it.
But this is just an outline to the jewel ornament text, and it's
Oh,
helpful just to be able to remember things, and if you need to have a list of things, it's likely to be printed here in this handbook here, so you can
Oh,
get really
perfect.
quickly.
Okay. So I'll be sure to compare the two.
So
And
you might enjoy that.
yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you for that. That's helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Kunga, how about you? Have you been reading the Jewel Ornament? What have you been doing with that?
Yes, I've been reading that, and I got your book. Though I don't think I read. Well, I read it. I've read it before, but I haven't. I don't think I reread the chapter we're going to be talking about today yet. Part 3, contributory causes. Is that where we
Yeah.
are?
Yes.
No, I haven't reread that again. But I do enjoy this book. I was reading the other one we're studying yesterday, so I got waylaid.
What other one is that?
The Samadhi Raja Sutra.
Oh, the Samadhi Raja. I see. I see. Yeah, it's a lot to take in. When you got these things going on, I understand.
I have a lot of got a lot of Dharma. I'm reading I'm giving a talk on the way of the Bodhisattva in February, and so I'm reading a little bit. I'm using that for my talk too. So but like you said, that's all I read. I mean, I have a lot of different Dharma things that I'm reading right now, but that's all I read.
Right. So, it's been, what, a couple of years or so that you've been kind of, with us and
Hmm.
diving into the Vajrayana. What's your sense of it? How are you enjoying the Vajrayana?
I'm enjoying it a lot. I have a couple different teachers that I listen to on YouTube, and also a podcast which comes out of Denver called the Denver Dzogchen, which is interesting because they really like Gyaltshen Rinpoche. They talk about Gyaltshen Rinpoche a lot. Um, and so I do the Anundro practice in the mornings. I've been doing that. It takes about hour and a half, hour to 45 minutes every morning, and it's been really helpful. I've been just kind of accumulating other little practices. I still haven't been able to set up a time to get an empowerment on anything, but so I just do the practices that are open, that you don't really need empowerments to practice. Um, I've been working with the 11-point practice for developing bodhicitta, which I like a lot, and I've been working with the 7-point cause and effect before. So, but just been, you know, I keep finding teachers that I like, so I'll just watch. There's so much on YouTube now. It's amazing. Venerable Gyaltshen is a really young Western teacher who's I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's a Vajrayana practitioner. She teaches at Milarepa College in Oregon. I find her to be really speaks in the Western language. Sometimes you get the lamas from Tibet and they're hard to follow, and you have to deal with the translating. But she's from Montana. Even though she's a monk. I don't think she's a lama. She's just a monk. But she does a really good job of speaking in a Western way that I can understand her and appreciate her, and she's very knowledgeable.
Oh, that's nice.
All
So
right, very good. Well, I'm glad that you're doing all that, and both of you are good students. Who also are good teachers. That you have people that you speak with and so on, and leading people. So that's part of the process. Is sometimes we're a student and sometimes we're a teacher.
yeah,
So
exactly.
and that's how we learn and how we help other people learn.
Yeah.
So that goes to chapter 3. The contributory cause, the spiritual master. So in the first chapter, we talked about the Buddha nature, our primary cause. We talked about that, and where the 5 families of the Buddha. We talked about that, and then last week we talked about the working basis, the precious human life. This is what we have to work with, our life, this time that we have in this world, and so on. So now the next thing is the influence of the spiritual master, of the teacher. And you have many teachers, over the course of your career of developing your understanding of the Dharma and so on, you'll meet many teachers and so on, and you see that, they all are speaking about the same thing, but maybe in slightly different ways, depending on where they come from, what their culture is, and so on. So to make yourself available to as many different teachers is always a healthy thing, but you always are going to have your favorites. But you always pick something up from somebody who you didn't expect to learn something from. So it's always good to participate in new things that are coming up. So the teachers, we talk about that, there's two truths. There's the relative truth and there's the absolute truth. We are steeped in the relative truth. Everything as ordinary beings, we're experiencing in a relative way. It's black because it's not white. It's good because it's not bad. We're always thinking about something in terms of its relative existence. It's positive because it's not negative. All these different ways of experiencing dualistic thought and so on. In the absolute truth or the ultimate truth, we think of things in a non-conceptual way, and that's very difficult. We can't think that way because our brain is wired to only process in a dualistic fashion. It's part of being a human being. It's part of our human nature. But at the same time, we can relax our intellectual mind and we can have these experiences that are absolute wisdom experiences that are part of that absolute truth. And we can't explain it, so it seems like a paradox. How can you experience this and not be able to explain it, even to yourself? And that's part of the practice. That's why we practice. We're talking about the academics, and the academics is this literal intellectual investigation and so on. But when we have this heart experience with the heart mind, where the words fail, they don't communicate what that love is, what that compassion is, what that bodhicitta is. But we know it when we experience it. And the more that we are able to have that practice, to be able to engage in that, the more real it becomes to us, the more we begin to recognize it within ourselves, and the more that we're able to recognize it with other people, people who are genuine, people who might appear to be, ordinary, but there's something about them that has a very spiritual connection, and maybe they're displaying that bodhicitta. But then there's going to be people who you might think would be, very good teachers or have very good deep experience, but yet they tend to be shallow. They tend to be, they don't really have the gravitas of the bodhicitta and so on. We love both. One is not necessarily better than the other, because even if it's a person of a mediocre bodhicitta, they're on the path. So we have a forgiveness, we have a love for them, we have a compassion for them, and they may have some more experience than us, so we're following them and we're engaging in conversation. And then there's going to be the times when we're with somebody who we really are truly learning from, who's opening us up to things that we haven't experienced before. They say, we talk about the different teachers, and one of the teachers that we talk about is the root teacher. Who is your root teacher? And so you may not have met your root teacher yet, but the root teacher is the teacher who really introduces you to help you to recognize your true nature, the nature of your mind. That's what the definition of the root teacher is. And you can have many teachers because, you know, one teacher is explaining it at one level, but another one may explain it at another level, or from a different culture or something like that. And it's all valid. It's all good experience. It's all good conversation and discussion. And many times it's best to engage with your teacher, the Sangha, in environments that are separate from a formal teaching like we're doing now, particularly in person, you know, over Zoom or something like that. It's hard to really develop that heart connection, although we try. But to be able to invite the Lama, the teachers, into your home, to be with them, you know, during meals when they have practices or teachings at the Dharma Center, to make yourself available to that. Sometimes that is the best kind of teaching, because you're learning something about the embodiment of the Dharma within them and how they behave, how they are working in the Dharma Center, how they're dealing with other people and so on like that. So it's those are valuable experiences, and whenever you can, you should take advantage of those things. One of the things that we're developing is a change in our lifestyle. Things that we might have thought, you know, oh, I'll never participate in that kind of a conversation. Oh, I'll never go to a Dharma center. Oh, I'll never have a meal with a Dharma practitioner or something like that. You find that as you do that, you find that there are things that you recognize within yourself and with them more and more and more and more. So it is we are looking for this within ourselves. It's not a vicarious intellectual experience. It is a heartfelt, heart-mind experience and so on. That really is, that's the absolute practice. That's what we're trying to do. So the relative practices lead us through the academics of how to develop that. You know, what the vocabulary is, what the 10 of these is, and the 8 of these, and the 5 of these, and you start putting that library of vocabulary together and everything, and then with the practical experiences, and, it kind of dovetails into changing your behavior, changing your lifestyle. So making yourself available to that is very, very important, I think. So here we're talking about the contributory cause of the spiritual master. So we go to a Dharma center, we attend a meeting like this, we read the spiritual scriptures, the textbooks, and so on, and we begin to recognize, the message of these particular teachers, because some teachers focus on particular aspects of the Dharma more than others, and so on, and we begin to make associations with that, and so on. So it's all perfectly normal. Because so much of it is being expressed in relative terms about absolute presence. I can't even say that it's absolute concepts, because the absolute is non-conceptual. So in the presence of that absolute, in the presence of that purity of the absolute that's not dualistic, the teacher will speak in similes. They will teach in logic. They will teach in scripture. So it's interesting to be able to engage in that. And the JEWEL Ornament of Liberation is really great in that, because it breaks it down in the different groups in each of the chapters and so on. So in scripture, we see the history of the teachings. We're able to meet great beings, who lived 500 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, or 2,000 years ago, and so on, and live and read something about their experience and the teachings that they gave, and so on like that. And those are great, great lessons. Some of these teachers are teaching in a very logical way. They're developing a very organized plan. The structure of the Dharma is one of the great, I think, attractions for Westerners in particular who like organization. You know, they like this kind of structure to be able to understand where we are. And sometimes we can take it to a level where we say, well, were they of the fifth level, or were they of the eighth level, or were they at the first level, or whatever? And they're trying to pigeonhole people, pigeonhole teachers, pigeonhole their brothers and sisters in these levels and so on. And that can be taking things a little bit to an extreme. And we should guard against that. It's interesting when it comes up in the conversation and so on, but it's not something that you want to go seeking and try and figure out or something like that. It can actually become a trap. You just want to be able to relax in the embodiment of that warmth of the experience. You know, we're having the experience of the absolute, and we're doing it through a relative means of doing that. So here in the in this outline book, it says that in logic we have suffering that is caused by obscurations. So it's saying, well, we have blockages, we have confusions. Logically, why do we have that? So the logic is telling us that these sufferings are made by causes that are precipitating in these sufferings. So the causes, we talk about the 5 root poisons. So it's like being poisoned. It's like our mental process, our logic is being poisoned. So the 5 basic poisons are, number 1 is ignorance, number 2 is hatred, number 3 is desire, number 4 is jealousy, and number 5 is greed and pride. So they're printed right here in this book, and they're in the JEWEL Ornament of Liberation. And what part of the logical application of learning this is these are things that we begin to memorize. We begin to memorize just through our constant reference to these things. So we're developing a sense of logic of the system through this process of reading, studying, and having these conversations. And we begin to learn these kinds of lists, because these lists help us to identify where we are, where our strengths are, and where our weaknesses are. You know, if we're constantly thinking about our pride, you know, it's going to be hard for us to be able to break out of that habit unless we know what pride is and how it manifests, or if it's hatred, or if it's anger, or it's ignorance, delusion, or attachment, and so on like that. So it's important to be able to have this kind of a guide to help us through that. So we're seeing these things as obscurations, as blockages. I think I made the point before that we have our true nature, which is like this indestructible diamond. Nothing will destroy a diamond but another diamond. So this is our true nature. It's in our heart center. You know, it's not the fleshy heart, but it's in our heart center. This is our energy, if you will, that we're born with and we have throughout our lives and so on. But the diamond gets blocked up. This true nature gets blocked up with our egocentric behavior, through our thoughts and our confusions and so on, through the obscurations. So those 5 basic poisons are those blockages, are the causes of those blockages, those obscurations that cover it up. So it's as if the diamond falls into a vat of mud and gets and the mud dries out and it just cakes there, and you just say, oh, that's just a hunk of dirt. But within that is that diamond nature. So we look to be able to clear away those blockages. So we have to identify the causes of the blockages, which are termed in sense of those 5 poisons. It's said that the Buddha, you know, this is a part of the mythology of the Buddha, is that while he was teaching 2,600 years ago, you know, he was traveling around northern India, going from one village to the next and so on. And he met many, many, many people. And as he met people, he was asking them how they were doing and how they felt and how they enjoyed, the talk that he might have given that day or something like that. And people were relating to him their experiences. And they're telling them their emotions. What is it that's blocking them from being able to have a pure sense of clarity and so on. So what has come out in the mythology of this is that there's 84,000 emotions. So this is symbolically saying, well, the Buddha, during that time of his teaching and going from village to village, met 84,000 different people, which is quite possible. And during that time, they're all telling him their emotions. And their emotions had a commonality of these 5 poisons. But the degree in which these 5 poisons were coming together in each of these people's lives can be different. And it can change over time. Maybe it's 5% this, 10% that, 20% this, 60% that. And for this space and time, it may be just like that. But then in another year or two, as other things are happening, those combinations of poisons can shift, can change, and so on. So it's difficult to be able to understand with a certainty of what that mixture is, but the more that we recognize these 5 root poisons and see that they're going to be, interconnected in so many different ways, and we just give it those 5 poisons, we just look at it from the 5 poison level. And then we say, okay, then these personality traits begin to develop and so on because of the imbalance of these 5 poisons without their antidotes. Because with those poisons come antidotes. And the antidotes are generated by the heart mind. It's the brain that is generating the 5 poisons. It's the heart mind that's generating the antidotes to those poisons. So it's like a sickness. So you go into the doctor's office and he examines you. You got this illness, you got this set of symptoms and so on. He recognizes this and he prescribes a medicine to you that is going to help you heal. Well, in our case, we're talking about that we're having emotional problems that is manifesting in so many different psychosomatic illnesses and neuroses and things like that, and that there is a medicine that we can apply, which is the Dharma. The Dharma is the medicine that helps us to recognize those causes and to be able to become an antidote to those causes so it does not precipitate in the illnesses themselves. So we're looking at things at the root level is the point here. So this logical structure is the means in which we are beginning this process. So it shouldn't be taken for granted. I know, Leah is a medical professional and so on, and Gunga, deals with this kind of thing all the time. He works in hospice, and I know that Zara, and welcome Zara tonight, I know that she's working with people that have, some profound issues and so on, psychological issues and physical issues and so on, and she works to help this. And having a structure to do that is very, very important. Whether you're doing it at a regular mental level or you're doing it at a Dharma level. Now with the Dharma level, you're seeing it at another application, another way, a higher way of looking at this, a more profound way of looking at this. So having this structure is important, and the spiritual guide, the spiritual teacher, will point this out to you. So it says, what are the obscurations? It says the afflictive emotions. So the afflictive emotions are those 5 root poisons that make up the 84,000 afflictive emotions. And we say that they're afflictive because they kind of paralyze us. We become afflicted with them, just as we would become afflicted with, germs and bacteria and viruses and so on like that. And we go through some period of getting sick and then healing and so on. So when that's happening, we're not thinking clearly and so on. So these afflictive emotions are like paralyzing us to some degree. Another of these obscurations is called the subtle obscurations to enlightenment. So the subtle obscurations to enlightenment include the wisdom obscuration of being a human being. And this is something that is really difficult for people to want to accept, to understand. If you want to talk about this, I'll be happy to hear what you have to say about it. But the point here is that we have a tendency to think, oh, I'm a human being. I'm the best person on the planet. Not only am I the best person on the planet, but I can take everything that I know and relate it to the entire rest of the cosmos and say that the wisdom that I have here is going to apply to that. All that far-flung stuff that's happening that is part of phenomenal relative truth, relative existence, and so on. And to assume that, to be able to say that that's true, I can't justify that. I can't say that. I can't think of it that way. But there are so many people who think that. And they spend their entire lives trying to justify that they have this wisdom that is equal to that of the cosmos, that is equal to all this spirituality, that is equal to a supreme being or whatever you want to call it, and so on like that. And that becomes the wisdom obscuration of being a human being, thinking that we can know everything that there is to know. We work to understand ourselves, but we may very well come to our limits, that we are three-dimensional beings, in that we see things, in three dimensions. We see it in a physical aspect, where there's width, there's depth, and there's height, and so on. And if it doesn't physically exist, it doesn't really exist. But then there's these sciences like psychology and things like that are invisible too, but they're finding, that there can be rules, there can be ways in which these things can be measured, for their usefulness and healthiness and so on like that. But that's the mental aspect, but there also can be this heartfelt, heart-mind essence, which is indestructible, that we talk about in the Dharma. So we have a physical body that the intellectual brain resides in. When the physical body goes away, when it dies, the intellect goes right with it. They're tied together. But the spiritual body, which we're learning to recognize, that remains. And it's beyond our being able to rationally intellectualize it. And that's what becomes a problem to many people. They want to weigh it. They want to feel it. They want to see it. They want to understand how it works. But yet, they won't pick up the spiritual books or take a spiritual teacher to learn what it is to be a spiritual being, to learn what that is. So that becomes, I think, a real problem for them. And we meet so many people like that, and even people who are in the practice, who are learning about this. They will read these things, they will read these books, they will attend the teachings, but they don't do the practices. And the practice is practicing to be a Buddha, practicing to be a wholly enlightened being. And that's a huge difference from just reading this vicariously and imagining that it's going to magically take be transformative. We need to role play to some degree. And then we begin to feel what it is to be that role, what it is to be that Buddha, or what it is to be that holy enlightened being, and it feels comfortable to us. And yeah, we want to do that more and more. So we begin to associate the academics then with the process of becoming that, and we slowly transform. We actually transcend our three-dimensional character, and we become more of a we could say a multi-dimensional character of other things that we can't really express. But we know the love, we know the compassion, we know the joy, and we know the equanimity. We know that bodhicitta that is within us, and we know that that's resonating, and that's telling us that yes, I'm familiar with this. I know what this is. Is this making some kind of sense? Am I going on too much?
No, can I interject, Pemidorje?
Sure.
So going back to the that first section there, where it talks about logic, when I was reading that, it just made me think about, we don't know what we don't know. And so the importance of the teacher is because they hopefully know more of the history of the teachings than we do. So they can, point us in the right direction if we're seeking to understand something deeper. They can point us to the right sutras to look at. This idea about suffering caused by obscurations, we're the ones with the obscurations. It's very hard to see your own obscurations. You need someone outside to kind of look in and say, hey, I think, this is where you seem to be having a problem. This sort of seem to be having some barriers or some difficulties. And then, of course, the spiritual master is the person who knows a little bit more deeper about these afflictive emotions and these obscurations. I'm really glad you brought up that one about the subtle obscuration of enlightenment and kind of elaborated on that. I really didn't get that when I just read it, but with your explanation, it makes a lot more sense. It made me think about the idea of emptiness, where that, when we look at things, it's really difficult to realize that our perspective is just our perspective. Someone else has a completely different perspective. And there are many different things that cause us to have our perception, But one of those things is that we are a human being. A dog has a completely different perception. There's some teachings I listened to where they talk about a pen, and they said for a pen, a human being looks at a pen as something to write with. A dog looks at a pen as something to chew on. There's no way you can convince a dog that the pen has any other use because that's the dog's nature. So as human beings, we have our particular nature, and it's hard for us to see it. It's like fish swimming in the water. They can't swim in the water. We have no idea, the limits of our condition. And that's what that made me think about when you talked about that subtle obscuration to enlightenment. So, and then the other two also, how to remove or purify the obscuration, and how do we gather accumulations of wisdom, and merit. The spiritual teacher is the one that sort of gives you these insights so that you can build on those practices. So, thank you.
Thank you for grounding that. That was very good. Yes. Thank you. Leah, did you have any comment, question?
Yeah, I think just going back to your analogy of like the diamond and, that authenticity that you have and kind of like removing the layers of that and just making sure to stay true to that. I think that's really helpful. And very true. I think especially when you feel lost and you need guidance, just kind of coming back to yourself in a lot of ways. And then also what you were talking about in terms of, the teacher. Also, I can think about like teachers, and I actually, funny enough, picking up yet another job, teaching nursing school students at the University of Maryland at Baltimore. And we're actually going to be teaching at an assisted living facility. And I think I did this maybe like 10 years ago and like teaching. And now I feel like, becoming the student all over again, not just like having to be the guide and be the teacher, but also kind of bringing a lot of the practices that I've learned to like through like yoga and Ayurveda and now the Buddhism piece. So I think the Buddhism piece really has given me the I don't know, like the layer and foundation and like the pathway, I guess, like to move forward in that way in terms of kind of back to what you were saying about like your purpose and your heart center and that like loving kindness and stuff that we need to kind of, strive for cultivating as we go through life. And I think I've just become a lot more settled and confident in like who I am and what I believe in and that kind of thing. But I've also kept it very calm and try to stay humble about that, not just kind of, coming out the ring just like really like strong or off-putting in any ways. Like my opinion matters, kind of to the point where I think you were talking about earlier. It's not like my way or the highway. It's actually like a group effort. And I think sometimes you do have to stand down in your heart when you know what you're doing or saying is like correct, until that time comes where at least you planted the seed and that, seed can grow and flourish in that moment. So it's taken a lot of maturity, I'll say that. So I feel like going into teaching now, I do feel like I am going to learn a lot, not only about myself again and be more, I don't know, like ingrained in the practice, more absorbed in teaching the students versus just kind of going through the motions of, okay, here's what you're learning and here's what I'm teaching. So I think it'll be a different vibe, like internal vibration too, not just for me, but also helping to raise the students as well in that way. Because I think I'm now bringing that spiritual aspect. So I think I just see things a little differently. It's, like the struggles or their path or their purpose and that kind of thing. And also letting them know that my path hasn't always been straight either. And it may go in different directions. This may be hard. And, we're teaching at a place where it's an assisted living facility and a memory care unit. It's not, like an outpatient well population necessarily. It's like people that have challenges at later stages in life. So I think it'll be interesting for them to see that part, because I think when you feel like you're younger, you don't feel like you're going to get older. And I think it'll be good for them to kind of see the whole life cycle, which I think spirituality definitely has a huge role to play in that. So I think in their development and maturity too, I think it's also showing me a lot as well. I know what it was like being a nursing student and, fast forward 20 some years later, being able to give back and pay forward like my experience, but in a better package, I guess, like in a better way, a more like solid, firm, polished type of way. So I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, I think all the points that you discussed really like hit home in terms of kind of just like whole person, like wellness and I don't know, really has come like full circle for me in terms of the concepts that I'm learning here and how I've applied those and continue to learn and apply them too.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just want to kind of try and nail the point. The emotions are fairly obvious to most of us, I think. That's something that we can recognize pretty readily. But this wisdom obscuration of thinking that we are human beings and we are wise beyond our ability. Have you, and dealing with that and coming to the point of being able to say, well, I just don't know. And I just don't know. I don't think I can know. It's beyond my ability as a human being to be able to intellectualize it, that there is something else that's going on, that's we identify as our spiritual body, our heart mind.
Yep.
What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that has to do with a couple of things. I think kind of knowing like your life path and your journey and in Ayurveda they talk a lot about like your Jyotish chart and like your birth chart, right? And I know we've talked about this before, but like your astrology, I think it's kind of when your life path and your astrology kind of like come together and you just really do find your purpose. So normally I wouldn't take on another job, but because it was something that was in my path and it was an opportunity and it's also in my birth chart to be like a teacher and an educator, I did kind of take that up. But normally I'd be like, oh, I shouldn't do this. But the funny thing is, it does bring me joy. So even though it's like another job I'm taking on that I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? It's really something that I feel in my heart. So I think going back to your point about, like finding your purpose and knowing that there's something bigger than you that's kind of driving you as a human being in this experience. is really where my heart lies with this. So, and it doesn't pain me to take it on either. You know, I'm like actually motivated. So a lot of my friends in my book club are like, "Oh my God, you're taking on a fourth job," and I'm like, not that I know why, but like to your point, that's what's happening. You know, like that's what the universe has in store for me, and I just feel like I've got to go with it, not against it, because again, like I said, it's a opportunity that's come back again. You know, it's like I've done this before, so it's, and even with my job now, um, I've done this before in a harder sense, but it's still like a friend of mine was asking me, like, are you liking your job? And I was like, I don't know, you know, like, but I'm doing it and I'm doing it well and I don't have any issues. And I'm like, okay, I don't know whether liking it or not. It's just, this is my purpose. I was meant to be in this role. I've accepted that. And I feel like I'm doing fine. um, but back to your point about when do I get to read, it's a little tough. So I do try. I do have my book and all my things. So, but yeah, it's that you know that conjunction between, you know, you finding your purpose and knowing, having that wisdom. So when that kind of comes together, I hope that kind of answers your question.
Very good, thank you.
Yep.
So I want to ask Zara, you know, what her thoughts are on this, and maybe to introduce the word pride in terms of this wisdom obscuration. That we begin to take pride, you know, oh, I'm so successful, I've done this, I've gone to college, I've been able to do this, I've got this great job, I got this money, you know, all these things, and we begin to develop this pride that actually becomes an obscuration to us because we think that we're, you know, we're so wonderful, we're so great. So how does all relate to you, Zara? What would you like to say?
Yeah, so have you already gone over the eight worldly dharmas or the eight worldly concerns?
We haven't gotten to that yet.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I'll just keep it light then, the light version. So that's definitely my challenge for my ego, like is that I just, you know, need to be right. And I remember when Lance, you posed that question to me, like as an indirect question, like, well, what do you like? Because it's always nice when you get the other person thinking about their own behavior patterns and habits and their why. Like, what is your intention in what you're doing? And so for me, pride was a big one, and that I recognized my intention wasn't for necessarily the benefit or, you know, always the benefit of others. And that it was like, oh, I'm going to get recognition, or, you know, like I realized that was kind of sneaking in, but my ego was really good at just saying, no, you're doing this for the well-being of others. But no, I also was doing it for attention and like recognition, like what you're saying, like praise, recognition, and attention. And it's so subtle. And your ego is so good at convincing you that you're not doing it. And that's the tricky part. She's so good at saying, no, you're doing the right. Of course you're helping these kids. Of course it's so sneaky. It's a sneaky sneak. And it's hard to catch sneaky sneak doing sneaky sneak if you're not really attuned to your thought patterns, like so aware of what it means to be completely altruistic and doing everything for the benefit, like donate like all your merit and every action for the well-being of others. It's just so hard. So yeah, that's my number one issue. And Lance, you've helped me a lot, like in like, you know, having that come out slowly and naturally, I think is the best way versus forcing it out of someone, because then it would have turned me off sooner to have that Band-Aid rip too quickly. If that makes sense. Aaliyah, like you're slowly ripping your Band-Aid at a natural pace, and that's the only way it's going to stick. Like that it has to come. You have to rip your own Band-Aid. I had to rip my Band-Aid, and Lance nudged me with the right process to get there. So thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, so this is a function of the spiritual guide, of the spiritual friends, the spiritual teacher, you know, to help you to do that. And so and you know, we've received that help from other beings, other teachers, and so on, and we pass it along, you know, but really it's all encompassed in what we call the Dharma, you know, the Buddha Dharma. So we see that as the healing medicine for all these things, and it's the structure of this logic, you know, system that we're able to put things into their place so that we can look at them compartmentalized and not as this big rush of stuff that we have to be able to sort out. We can put it into its respective places and nip at it a little bit at a time and be able to see that there is this pattern to all of this. There's a pattern to the corruption of the influences, and there's a pattern to the healing of the medicines, of the antidotes to the problems that we create for ourselves and so on. And ultimately what we want to be able to do is stop the problems at the cause state. There's a cause, there's an action, and then there's a result. That's karma. Karma is the action. So there's a cause for the karma. We take the action of the karma, and then there's the precipitation. There's the result of it, and so on. So what we're trying to do is to learn to stop things, to cut things off right at their root, at the causes, and so on. So things, we begin to develop a simplicity that our brain has created these complex personality traits and so on that we kind of enjoy, and it's what makes me so great, that I have such a great, dense personality. But the reality is, the truth is very simple, and we just want to lead a simple life. So that's what we're trying to do. So the logic helps us to do that, and the teacher is speaking at times in terms of the structure and in terms of that logic and so on. So it's an integral part of our enlightenment, of our liberation from suffering. So as we do that, we begin to accumulate wisdom and merit. So the wisdom is the body of knowledge that we have of the relative, our dualistic experiences and so on, and we can begin to see those patterns in that and so on, and we can begin to we begin to accumulate the absolute experiences that when we are in meditation, contemplation, that goes to the meditation level where it's non-dual, where there's no thought involved, but we come back into our ordinary state of mind, which is dualistic and so on, and we see that there's something else. There's something else about being a human being that we didn't recognize before. As our Kunga said, we don't know what we don't know, but the spiritual teacher will begin to guide you into a direction, and in this case, into the direction of the absolute, and be able to emphasize the practice that allows you to do that. You're not going to intellectualize yourself into enlightenment. You have to experience it. Now, people will argue about that or discuss that, but I'll say that that's my experience with it, and we can discuss it any time. But it's having the experience and then trying to understand what it meant, what it was as best we can, and so on. But it's non-dual, it's non-conceptual, so it's very difficult for the brain to process that. It's the heart. When you fall in love, does it make sense intellectually, or does it make sense in your heart? Can the brain misinterpret the heart? And can the heart be swamped by the brain thoughts? So we need to be able to navigate through that conundrum, to be able to do that. And the meditation is part of that process. Gunga, do you have something you want to add?
Oh, no, I wanted to ask you a question. So number 3, how do we remove or purify obscurations? When you were talking about, cutting the cause for our negative karma, would that be taken as how we remove the obscurations? Is, basically by not doing something negative right now, we prevent that obscuration from arising in the future. So in a way, it's like removal. And then my understanding is purification is more of either, purification might be some difficult situation that we're going through that's purifying some old karma that we did, or something we're actually doing, like a Vajrasattva mantra, to purify something that we're regretting that we did and we remember. But that are in the right.
Well, there's 2 points. You made 2 points, and both are correct. First, there is this logical way to do things, but then when you finally exhaust all these reasons why you're not going to do those things, or you keep doing the same things over again, although you're applying this wisdom technique to be able to cut through and stop doing these things, that you just got to say to yourself, I'm going to stop doing this. And maybe in your life you've already had experience like that. Maybe you were smoking cigarettes when you were 20 years old, and you said one day, I'm just going to stop. Maybe you were having drinks and doing that. Maybe you were going out with friends and having, unwholesome conversations. I'm going to stop doing that. You just take that kind of action. To get to that point, you're going through this logical process, but there just comes this point where you say, I'm going to stop. So what is that logical process? So if we apply this to the 5 poisons, and right here in the outline book that you have, we've got in this middle box on this page that we're on, page 5, and it says on the left-hand side, it says the 5 poisons. So it's identified the hatred, the desire, the ignorance, the greed, and the envy or jealousy. Then the next column, it says the 5 antidotes. What are the 5 antidotes to those 5 poisons? So there's a direct and specific medicine for each one of those things structurally. So for hatred, we have to apply loving kindness. We have to apply wisdom. We have to be able to see through the hatred. What is causing the hatred? What is causing the aggression? What is causing the anger? And it's something that we've fabricated in our mind. It's something that may have been handed down to us because, there's somebody in the family who is kind of an outcast. Everybody else hates this person, or maybe it's a part of the family. They hate them. And why? And you go back several generations and you find out, well, somebody did something that was distasteful, and now through the family, this hatred has been passed down. Or maybe it's the color of their skin, or maybe it's their religion or something like that. People, the ego wants to be unique. So it will challenge anybody or anything to make you unique and cause them to be the perpetrator of evil or misdeeds or whatever it is that you want to say. So it's through loving kindness, of understanding that everybody's a human being, everybody is susceptible to misconception and so on. Everybody is susceptible to these imprints that are given to us by our families, our friends, going to school, our politicians, all this kind of stuff. We develop a wisdom. That loving kindness becomes a wisdom that we can see through their hatred. Another extreme way of looking at this, somebody's coming at you with a weapon and they want to kill you. And do you meet them with equal hatred? They're trying to kill me. My life is more important than theirs. I'm going to try and kill them. Or do you try and use wisdom to try and diffuse their anger? Now that sounds like a lot to do. That's a heavy thing to do. But yet it can be done. We see that in hostage situations. We see that, where, somebody has taken these hostages, but then there is this intervention that's trying to go on where somebody has come in to try to talk sense to these hostage takers, that they're causing more harm than they need to, and so on like that, and let's hear your problem. And they're using wisdom, they're using loving kindness to get to the root of their hatred in order to dissipate their hatred. So loving kindness becomes the antidote to anger. And this is all, so I'm telling you this, this is vicarious maybe, but this becomes food for meditation. This becomes food for contemplation, to sit there and think about this. And maybe this is your meditation center. Session. I'm going to think about hatred, and I'm going to think about loving kindness as the antidote, and sit there and for an hour or whatever it takes and go through all this until you finally exhaust it, in your own mind. And maybe you got to come back to it again and again, but it's a process of being able to do that. So the next one is desire or attachment or passion, lust, is all involved with desire. And how do we overcome that? We overcome that with looking at the faults of samsara. Now that's pretty vague. That's pretty abstract. What does that mean? The faults means the misconceptions, the wrong ideas, of samsara, this ocean of suffering that we live in, this phenomenal nature, which has a name. In Sanskrit, we call it samsara. In the Christian tradition, they call it the Sophia. In the Greek, in the ancient Greek Bible and so on, they call it the Sophia. And other traditions have their name for what this phenomenal world is that seems to be steeped in this suffering and so on. So the faults of samsara are that we may be physically attracted to somebody, and we want that person. Our lust has been really high and so on, and we're seeing that person as being beautiful. But then to see that, and it's blocking everything else out for us. But then to be able to see that person in 25 years from now, or 30 years from now, when they start getting old, or if they get sick, or if they get injured and they lose a body part or something like that, they get some kind of terrible disease or something like that, are you going to love them in the same way? Are you going to be desirous of them the same way? So we're seeing that fault of samsara, of that change that we go through with our physical body or our intellect. Maybe, my wife is going to have dementia. Am I going to have the love for her that I have for her as a young 25-year-old that I'm going to have for her when she's 65 or 75 because of her dementia? And to be able to look at that and to be able to project that into, your behavior and be able to say, you know what, I really got to think about this. I really got to understand this. And that process of thinking about those faults of samsara are the things that neutralize that desire, that attachment, and so on. And maybe we need to put this into a perspective. Maybe it is just lust, and all I'm interested in is just that gratification, that instant gratification. And for my sake and for the other person's sake and for the sake of the family and everything, I need to make a better judgment about things. So this is the antidote to desire. Ignorance or delusion. What is the antidote to ignorance or delusion? The answer to that is education. We don't know what we don't know. If you want to know about spirituality, you got to start going to places that teach spirituality. You go to the high schools, you go to the colleges and universities, they may not be teaching it. They're teaching it from a logical point of view. They're not teaching it from an experiential point of view. They're not talking about it from the point of becoming Buddha or becoming Jesus or becoming Allah or whatever tradition you practice, that there are these heroes in those traditions and so on, and to avail yourself of what those heroes are composed of, what it is that they embody, that you need to educate yourself for, to be able to overcome your ignorance and your delusion about that. So I just was having a conversation with my sister. My sister, a few years younger than I am, and she's got family and so on like that, but they're very spiritual people. And they are always in trouble because they don't have the spiritual balance in their troubles. They got their physical body and they've got their intellectual mind, and that's all that they see. They can't see the pivot point of their spirituality. And so, I'm just making the point to her. I said, I got to remind you, I've said this to you before, but, it would be worthwhile for you, because now she's got a granddaughter who's 13 years old. And, when does she start her spirituality? She's been pushed away from spirituality because the family doesn't believe in spirituality. But it's the thing that they need the most of all. So it happens in all families, in all situations and so on, but that doesn't mean that it can't be corrected. And it's got to be corrected by education, by pointing this out, by being a spiritual friend and saying, hey, look, the thing that you're missing in your life is your spirituality. And then they'll just shut up. And then they try and defend why they're not spiritual, or they are spiritual, but I don't have time, or whatever all the explanations are that come up and so on. So education overcomes delusion, overcomes ignorance. And then greed is overcome by generosity. Greediness, we want all that we can get. We want all the power. We want all the money. We want all the possessions and so on. And we become miserly with it. We don't want to share it. We just want more and more and more. I can't spend all that I've got, but yet I want more. These people got so much money, got so much power. And they want the power over and over and over again. They get these powerful jobs, whether it's in government or it's business or whatever, and they don't want to retire. They don't want to give somebody else an opportunity. They hold on to this like they're the only ones that can see the truth. They know what's best. And we've seen it so many times in government and in business and other things. I'm sure that there's, in the medical profession, there's doctors, surgeons or whatever, who continue to go into the operating room and are getting to the point where they start making mistakes, but they won't stop because they think they're the only ones. They have some kind of a God complex or something like that. So to be generous, to be able to say, I'm going to teach you what I know. The greatest gift that a teacher can give to their student is something that is going to help them, their student, to surpass the teacher and to allow that to happen. That's generosity, being able to do that, to be able to give them something that is going to carry them further than the two of them by themselves would ever become. So generosity overcomes greed, overcomes miserliness, whether it's money or it's possessions, power, responsibility, all these different things. And then the last one is envy or jealousy, the fifth poison, envy or jealousy, which is like a festering, wound in the back of the head, in the back of the mind. That it's not obvious, but it's there. Just I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to have that car. I'm not good enough to have that spouse. I'm not good enough to have that relation. I'm not good enough to have that job. And I'm jealous of the people that have those things. and it festers in the back of your mind, and it pulls your self-confidence down and so on. So the thing that overcomes that, the antidote, is fearlessness, is developing fearlessness, is understanding what fear is. Fear is the root of suffering. I don't want to suffer. And in not wanting to suffer, I create this fear about things. I won't engage. I won't do things. And I create neuroses to defend my fearfulness and so on like that. So by engaging in practice and engaging in education, engaging in the other things we've been talking about, because these things are interconnected, we develop a fearlessness. We develop the ability of courage to be able to enter into situations that we might otherwise feel powerless to be able to control and so on. So we need to engage in those. So here we see that there's 5 basic poisons, and there's 5 antidotes to each, or 5 poisons directly related to each one of those poisons and so on. And so we need to be able to understand this at a experiential level. We need to see, I'm sure every one of us at one time or another in our lives have experienced each one of these poisons and have applied these antidotes. But maybe, you didn't realize that's what you were doing. Maybe it happened when you were 8 years old or something like that. Maybe your parents were teaching you through this or something like that, and you didn't recognize it as powerful as we're trying to demonstrate it now. Because part of being a wise person is being able to articulate these things, is being able to talk about these things, being able to teach these things to yourself and to others and so on. What results is the next column, which are the 5 wisdoms. We say these are the 5 wisdoms. So the wisdom of overcoming hatred by loving kindness develops mirror-like wisdom. Mirror-like wisdom. So it's like looking into a mirror and saying, oh, there's the image of what I want to be. And you go to get that image and there's nothing there. It's just a reflection in a mirror. So we look at all things as just these kinds of raw appearances that we judge to be real. We manufacture, we fabricate this hatred. We fabricate this separation between me and others. Why? Because it makes me stronger. It makes me more important. It makes my family more important. It makes my group more important. We manufacture this image in a mirror. So we develop that wisdom of appearances, the wisdom of mirror-like wisdom. So there's much more to this, and you can read it in the book. You should. Then the next one is desire. To overcome desire, the faults of samsara, and we develop discriminating awareness. We're overwhelmed with all these things of attachment. We want all these things. We cling to these things. We grasp these things. We want these things. And we need to be able to compartmentalize, discriminating awareness. What can I work on now that I can see a result in? And then move to the next one. After maybe you only get 50% of the way here, but you've exhausted your patience with it and everything, but you need to move on to something else. You compartmentalize and go with that. And then you do that and you move on and so on like that. It's a process. This discriminating awareness is a process. And it's the discriminating awareness that helps us to develop the antidotes of the other 4 things. So it really starts with discriminating awareness. We'll talk more about this another time because that's another couple-hour conversation. But the wisdom of discriminating awareness, of being able to focus on what it is that you are going to be considering. and not trying to do too many things at one time. We just swamp ourselves and nothing gets accomplished. Then the next one is the ignorance that we overcome with education becomes the all-pervading wisdom. The all-pervading wisdom. We finally realize that this phenomenal nature is all part of our dualistic experience, and we need to be able to register that in its interconnection, register it. Everything is tied into everything else. And we begin to see how that operates. We begin to recognize this all-pervading wisdom. You know, it seems as though there is this abiding nature of things. Some people would say, oh, this is God's creation. God created this. Whatever you deem that to be. You know, but God knows everything that's going on. You know, so this all-pervading wisdom is a way of saying that you are that God. You are God. You are pervading your wisdom. This wisdom pervades all things, and you have the ability to be able to understand the mechanics of how this is interconnected. You may not understand it totally. You may not understand it why and how it manifests and so on, because the essence of it is non-dual in the absolute sense. But in the relative sense, there is a logic to it. There is a structure to it. So we undertake that process of understanding that pervading wisdom and see how all this operates and so on. So the Buddhism, the Dharma, and all the other traditions, the Muslim and the Jewish and so on, all has this all-pervading wisdom about it and has their way of being able to recognize this. So we begin to see them all as being the same. They're all trying to maintain this system by which they rationalize what is going on in this phenomenal world, this all-pervading wisdom. And then the next one is the greed and the generosity that is the medicine for it, and we develop a wisdom of equanimity. We see that all things are the same. All things, all this physical stuff is made up of the same stuff. All beings who have intellectual mind go through the same psychological stuff to process all this and everything. So we're doing that. So we're developing this wisdom of equanimity. We're seeing these different spiritual traditions as speaking in the same, about the same things, but in different terms. But they're trying to understand the heart nature, the heart mind. They're trying to understand the difference between that and the intellectual mind and the physical body. And they do it in slightly different ways and so on. But we're seeing that there's a sameness now there, this wisdom of sameness. There's this wisdom of experience, this same experience. Whether you're a man, you're a woman, you're a young boy, you're a young girl, you're an old man, you're an old woman, all these things have a sameness to them. And to be able to recognize that wisdom of equanimity. And then the last one again is the envy or the jealousy and the fearlessness. And then what we develop is the wisdom, the all-accomplishing wisdom. The all-accomplishing wisdom. That with the fearlessness being applied to that festering wound in the back of the head and so on, we find we can accomplish everything that we want to do. And if we find that we made a mistake, we can back up. We can admit our mistake and say, I'm not going to go any further. I'm going to back up. I had a choice. I had a crossroads 2 years ago or 5 years ago. I had a choice and I chose this way. But now I realize I made a mistake. Now I've got to back up and I got to go back and I got to take the alternative that maybe leads to the happiness that I was really looking for. That takes a lot of courage to do that. How many people do you know, and maybe you've done it yourself, where you've been living a lie? Maybe it was in a relationship. Maybe it was in your job. You know, different things happen different belief systems and so on. And you continue that because you're afraid, you're full of fear to admit that you were wrong because of our wisdom obscuration. I don't know everything. Try and get some people to admit that they don't know anything or everything. So that's the wisdom, the all-accomplishing wisdom. So I kind of went through this quickly. You can read this in the chapter. It goes into more detail. And you should, to understand the different layers of all this and the different examples that the book can make and so on like that. So this is all functionality of the spiritual teacher, of the spiritual friend, of the contributory cause of you becoming liberated. So we're being very, very fundamental, very literal here. So I hope this helps, and we've come to our 8:30 time, but I'm happy to talk if anybody has any questions or comments about anything that we said tonight.
I wanted to pass on. You talked about the meditating on hatred and meditating on loving kindness, and so I just wanted to mention a specific meditation process to meditate on the kindness of the mother. There's this idea in Buddhism that because of multiple lifetimes, all beings have been your mothers multiple times. So contemplating the four kindness of the mothers during your meditation, the kindness of the mother to give birth to you, the kindness of the mother to be willing to sacrifice her life for you, the kindness of the mother to show you what to take up, what to put down, teach you, and then the kindness of the mother to sacrifice things for you when you're fully dependent. So basically sacrifice her body, her time, all those things so that you could, as an infant, receive that 24-hour care that you needed. And then you can also continue it to the kindness of your mother in the beginning and middle and end of your life. Like the kindness that your mother showed you at the end of your life when she passed. That experience of grief, what that was like. And you can extend that then to the kindness of all beings in this life. Like everything that you have in your life is a result of the kindness of others. Your house, your car, your job, your food, your relationships, your job, everything. There's nothing that's there that isn't there because of someone else. Every book you ever read, every movie you ever saw, every Facebook post you ever looked at is because someone else put it there. If those people didn't exist, you wouldn't have those things to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good, yes. And that is a strong topic that we will spend much more time on as we move along in our study here.
Thank you, Kunga. That was very inspiring. I like the way you kind of summarized that so beautifully. Thank you.
Yeah, that's definitely like a good note to end on, because it's like similar to how I think my nursing students are going to come into clinical. It's going to be like, oh, I'm young and immortal and it's all about me kind of thing. And instead of like the life spectrum of what happened on each side. And I hope that through this and like through what you just said in our talk today, that I can kind of bring to the forefront, it's not just here right now, even though we're trying to enjoy this moment to moment existence, it's a spectrum, like it's a journey for the students also understand too. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Very good. I'd like to suggest that, I've got here on my table, I've got all kinds of notes. I take a lot of notes, and I suggest that you all make notes about this. These 5 poisons, the 5 antidotes, and the 5 wisdoms. Make a note that you can put in your pocket. So during the day, you can pull it out and you can refresh your memory about what it is. And maybe in your situation with the student nurses coming in, it'll be a preparation for that or a way to sort it out with them or something like that. So use these tools.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Then, Kunga, you're the Umze this evening. If you would recite dedication prayer, your choice, page 33, 34, 35, 36, whatever, if you will recite dedication, please.
All right, let's do the page 33 Kagyu Lineage dedication prayer.
Very good.
Dorje Chang, Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dharmalo, Gampopa, Pagmadrupa, and Lord Drikungpa. Please bestow upon us the multiple blessings of all the Kagyu Lamas. By this virtue may I achieve the omniscience, may I defeating all enemies' confusion. May all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara. Bodhicitta, the excellent precious mind, where is unborn, may it arise, where is born, may it not declaim, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activity spread far and wide. I pray that I am not to be separated from you. As Manjushri the warrior realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow on their path and fully dedicate all their merit for all sentient beings. By the blessing of the Buddha who attained three kayas, by the blessing of the truth, the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit.
And the Drikungpa prayer, please.
By the virtues collecting the three times, by myself and all beings, samsara and nirvana, and by the inner root of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the Drikungpa Ratnashri is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue to increase study, practice, contemplation, meditation to the end of samsara. Sarva Mangalamana.
And the end of page 37.
Om Ahung. Om Ahung, Om Ahung. May my body, speech, and mind be inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Very good. Thank you all very much. Good topics, good questions, and good comments, so thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Pema Dojo. See you Monday.
Thank you.
Bye. See you soon.